Sunday. Sean Fain, Taylor High School, president UAW since 2023, born Kokomo, Indiana in 1968. An electrician by trade, he worked at an auto parts plant in Kokomo, Indiana. He blames variously the billionaire corporate class for the woes of the US economy. The group for whom there are no woes, but for the working class, ... I listened to him on the news today. Last night I stopped to listen to Abby Martin on Joe Rogan, with both men talking to breezy, bright people who use a particular language, a shared language, Ali Velshi and Abby Martin, a language I'm used to, but I do not feel. I heard a difference. There was a definite wiping away or pushing aside of niceties. They do not talk like me, but I like the way they talk. I'm not attuned to any of these people for the phenomena they are, Joe or Sean. I don't know them at all. I do habitually listen to people I agree with, but I don't feel. I don't feel most of the chattering class. I believe they are called. I agree with, Jill Stein, but I have to translate her to pour through. I confess it is my problem, but that might be shared. What I hear from Sean is strange. The billionaire corporate lot might now be Democrats. He and his union endorsed Joe. Sounds like he will endorse Kamala. Joe's, quote, "here's the deal," always seemed a little faux. He is a politician, and it is so long since he has been fluent. Back in the day, he spoke like Ali and Abby, I remember. But it isn't vocabulary, it's a sound, pushing, a trying for the word, an irritation almost, an impatience with sophistry. I like it, and I trust it. They are almost like Hitchens with less vocabulary. What they say is driven by passion. Now, I confess, Karine Jean-Pierre, for instance, I cannot listen to. She has no weight. There is no push. The words stutter out, fall out, moan out, eyes flutter. I feel no solidity. I hear unsureness. She is not connected. She gets frothy. She's not weak, or she won't admit weakness. It is part of her ambition and therefore her success. Originality has not crossed her path, ever. I hear intelligence, Jen Psaki too. I know they are clever people succeeding where brightness is at a premium, but to be honest, a room full, I would go mad. And again, I don't disagree, at least I think I don't, but I really don't know. The cleverness reads evasive, afraid, duplicitous, as people reveal themselves at standing ovations, listening to Bibi for a hideous display of messianic rage. I wonder. This is visceral, a capacity I trust more and more, a radar. I find myself saying, arguing the issues, the genocides and the terrorisms of the day, that I simply disagree with what my opposite is saying, then shake hands and depart. It is not about what I think, it is what I am. I am a peaceful man, now listen to this, through and through, which makes me a terrorist to you, who live by threatening us alone. I have no idea. I have decided I am not in disagreement with them. I have just lost faith that what they say is them. I feel impatient with the language. Again, I have no clue what it really expresses. It seems they are intentionally hiding themselves behind the language. They are seeking in this jumble of spaces and reaching outs for something authentic. There's no more authentic than they were 100 years ago. That way it will not be found. It is a defensive wall for people who do not know themselves, who speak only to be heard and nodded at. I think that this art is destroying some desperately needed politics. Gertrude says to Polonius, more matter, less art. This might be said to a dozen Jens and Justines, 100 Blinkens and Starmers. Maybe you understand them. I don't. I understand they do not know themselves, so lying is natural and forgivable. It is currency. Will Durant, I have been listening to, narrated by a rather craggy, pedantic voice, which is a great pity because Durant is clearly somebody. Says, John Wycliffe died of a stroke in 1384, where other historians insist he was burned at the stake for his heretic thoughts. Now, why would Durant do that? Or does it matter? Eva Schubert ponders, was Queen Isabella of Spain a tortured, compassionate, talented queen perverted by her zealous, fanatic inquisitor Torquemada? They both minimized the Peasants' Rebellion of 1381 in England. It is my bias, I don't write history, that John Ball might be much more significant a figure in history than history gives him credit for. Look him up. Their stress is the religious one, the internal quibbles that somehow became justification for horror, the flaw at the center of religion's all and overwhelming in Christianity that overwhelms my considerable ability to forgive. Our historians and storytellers make much of Aztec heart-rippings, Druid dreadfuls, and pagan Nazis, but nothing approaches the Inquisition. I'm only observing here, no accusations, observing that the Reformation is considered a revolution, but it wasn't really. The historians I am encountering deal with that period of history, fascinating, really, from mid-14th century to the catastrophe of the late 15th century, culminating in the Inquisition and the bell tolling for the pagan world that was 1492, are reading only what happened to the 1% and their prelates. A lot happened to the rest of humanity, but history, a university subject, mysteriously is never done from that perspective. Wycliffe was a theologian pissed off with the decadence of Rome. What the rich did. Religion optional. It seems that by Luther's time, his father was very disappointed at Luther's chosen vocation. The general view of the church at this time was that priests were debauched abusers of the local people. This prudery seems to be at the heart of Luther more than anything else. Come on, meinen Herren, we are supposed to be transcending all this, or something. John Ball's much more revolutionary sally against the church was that nowhere in the Bible was there justification for a ruling class. He said, in essence, all men and women were equal, created equal, which with this he had no qualms. Wycliffe, Huss, and Luther were not interested in this. They were not interested in the people. They were critics, rather, of the way the Democrats criticized the Republicans, essential agreement with a few heresies to kill each other over. The perfect analogy is the translation of the Bible. It is still the Bible, and very few people could read, so translating it to English would allow a large number of a very small number of people access. Very much the social media arguments were used. Do not enable the masses to participate. Or when they do and behave exactly the way the Brahmin did with the information, blame the day's strifes on this common access. I really suggest people listen to some of the debates among the reputed leaders of our world. Once one gets past the vocabulary of Durant or Schubert, nothing is being said. History as we know it and use it as sanction and context for the present is, in their deliveries, just a fancy story. Let Isabella look like her Disney portrait, please. Torquemada can be Disney too. Why? Among the propaganda you are looking at, the whetting and sharpening of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and general racism from which the world has really not yet recovered. That is Queen Isabella and her chap. The ghastly rulers of Europe, for whom European history is merely cover, the worldly king and the superstitious pontiff class, had turned what might still on paper have been a decent, sensible reproof from what had come before into a culture so depraved and twisted the new world was long overdue. A revolution indeed was waiting to happen, but never did. And as Project 25 looms, it seems to me, after 250 years, the US has just continued and concentrated a European disease. I'd say the Reformation was as unrevolutionary as the American Revolution. Both were adaptations driven by men who once or twice stumbled upon obvious hypocrisy. The Bible preached poverty, the church was revoltingly rich. Wow. And were burnt at the stake for threatening the status quo of the 1%. John Ball's communism was really much more encompassing. A real revolution, a stepping off point, and in fact a step backwards to the commons. Much, much more dangerous than the petty squabblings between Jefferson and Adams that became the newest New Testament. The effort to redecorate the club and its membership. The Wat Tylers of life were to remain in shadows. No movies. We only get caricatures, mostly I think because we are so many Katrines and Antonys. The well-dressed shallow smilers of the day, and we crave reflection, without which we'd wonder if we were there at all, just the way our God drew us up. Sheep. Is and Wat, Isabella, and Wat Tyler are neither hero nor villain. She wielded some power and inflicted her neuroses upon us, upon the Jewish and Muslim people of Spain, who had apparently lived side by side with Christians for several hundred years, under whose rule? Before her God insisted this state of affairs was intolerable. This peace and tolerance, yuck, said her God, they are impure. Had John Ball not been so erased, we might have been spared her and what followed. So we just ignored him.